Welcome to Rent-A-Friend Radio, where we use logic and reason in every season to maintain compliance with wisdom and science. I am your friend at a very reasonable hourly rate, Rent-A-Friend 2000, the man with a plan to bring the facts on stacks of wax, showering the nation with science education. And today we are answering your listener mail. A longtime listener and frequent commenter who frequently has good comments and questions, Chaosism, sent in a very insightful comment about the video determining a speed limit. He says, "Hey there, your favorite pain in the neck here, wink, about moral principles. At 37 seconds you said, objective means real regardless of perception. It would be true even if every living person thinks otherwise. At 58 seconds, and also, likewise, objective morals determine right and wrong absolutely. Popular opinion has no influence on the rightness or wrongness of anything. Agreed so far, in terms of the meaning of objective. A little later, at a minute 42, you cited a couple of events. Here's an example, the Nazis. If the Nazis had won the war and killed everyone else on Earth so that every living person on Earth thought that the Holocaust was a good thing, the murder of the Jews would still be evil. This entails an assertion about the existence of moral principles, but a little later still, at 2 minutes and 8 seconds you said, while people fight about the application of moral principles, there is universal agreement across time and space that such principles are real and ought to be applied. At 2 minutes and 27 seconds, and also, every culture, every human culture that has ever existed agrees on these moral principles. Our disagreement is not on whether or not good and evil are real, or even what good and evil are, but really just on how good and evil should be applied, or what is the proper application of moral principles. You appear to be directly contradicting yourself. First, you correctly argue that a popular belief has no bearing on objective truth. Then you appeal to popular belief to justify the existence of these moral principles. This renders your assertion bare and in need of demonstrable evidence of its truth. If you disagree with my assessment, then could you please clarify, specifically in terms of the point of the later two quoted statements? Greetings once again, Chaosism. I see what you mean by seeming to contradict myself. I think I just failed to clarify the point I was making. I am distinguishing between moral principles and application of those principles. Right away, I want to clarify I do not mean it is impossible to find an individual who is not as I describe, just as there are people who cannot see the color blue. But for the majority of the human race, as the normative human experience, we all know there are objective moral principles, just as we all know there is the color blue. Or we all know that there is a real universe outside of ourselves which corresponds to our perceptions. I am not appealing to the common belief in objective morals, but to the common experience. We all experience the color blue, even if for some reason we did not believe colors existed. We all experience the universe outside of our own heads, which makes sense of our perceptions, even if we are David Hume. In fact, I can find you people who will argue from what they believe to be scientific observation that the colors blue and yellow do not exist. However, those same people experience the color blue, and could easily identify it. They profess to believe and even attempt to prove that blue does not exist, yet they still experience it. A lot of atheists will tell me that objective morals do not exist, but then also tell me that they know kindness is good and cruelty is bad. They have rejected objective morals from their worldview, but they cannot remove it from their experience. So I do not appeal to the belief in morals to establish their existence, but to our shared experience of them. In defense of this experience, I do as C.S. Lewis does in The Abolition of Man, in the appendix which he calls Illustrations of the Tao. In this appendix, Lewis makes a sweeping examination of past civilizations and finds that they all agree on a vast number of moral principles, which are put into practice as they create the laws which govern them and define their cultural norms. Lewis even makes the point which perhaps you're hinting at, that the universal consensus of moral principles would not prove or cause their existence. However, as William Lane Craig is often to point out, one must ask what is the most reasonable explanation of the observed facts. In this case, is it more reasonable to see from observation that the whole human race observes these moral principles and even agrees largely on the application of them, yet they do not exist, and murder is no more right or wrong than self-sacrifice for one's country? Or is it more reasonable to think that these observations and experience support the existence of objective moral principles, just as the shared experience of colors supported the existence of the color blue as a real thing long before we had the scientific description of light waves or the electromagnetic spectrum? Perhaps you may not consider the general consensus across space and time to be evidence of the existence of objective morals, but I will assert that their existence is an appeal to the most reasonable explanation. Even more so, I will encourage you that your own moral experience is hard data which you cannot refute. You can ignore it, or try to explain it away, but like the color blue, you cannot convince yourself that you do not experience it. And again, I assert that the most reasonable explanation of the experience is that those objective morals, like the color blue, really exist outside of yourself, and you are perceiving a real thing. To make another analogy, we all have memories of the past, but there is no method of touching the past. We cannot prove the past with science because we can only observe the present. But our universal experience of memory is either a universal illusion or universal evidence for the existence of the past as a real thing. Memories and morals are alike in the sense that we can argue about what they are, but we all have the experience that they are, and I believe that we can use reason to discover the truth about them. But what do I mean by shared moral principles? Principles are the underlying reason we choose one behavior over another, not the behavior themselves. For instance, we all tend to agree that patriotism is good. Coming to the defense of your family and kin is good. When we watch Planet of the Apes, we tend to feel we ought to root for the humans because we are humans, and they are our family, our kin. When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the United States did not discuss whether or not we deserved it and wonder if we should assist them in killing our troops. We, as a nation, rose to defend ourselves from an attack without having that discussion, because all people tend to agree with the principle that they should act to defend their nation or city or tribe merely because it is the one to which they belong. We all agree that the human race should be protected from disease or any threatening agent. We would kill an ape who threatened us merely because it threatened us. We would not debate whether we ought to let the ape kill us and our family. Even if we really did not want to kill the ape, the life of the human has to take precedence merely because it is a human life. Every time we take an antibiotic or call an exterminator, we are choosing to kill hundreds or millions of members of another species to protect even a single member of our own species, because we believe in the principle that the human race ought to be protected. Even the Nazis believed these principles. The problem is, the Nazis also believed that the Aryans were the only true humans, and thus the lower human subspecies were just as toxic to the future of the human species as it would be if people started interbreeding with apes or pigs. Nazis are known as anti-Semites, haters of the Jewish race, but they considered all non-Aryans, so Jews, Asians, and Africans, to be subspecies, and thus not truly human. And one of the reasons they thought this was because Darwin taught that non-white races were less human, more ape. He called them lower, he called them savages. As recently as the 1900s, American evolutionists were arguing that schooling was wasted on Africans because they were too subhuman to be ever elevated to the level of the white race. But I digress. I have a whole series on this topic waiting to be created. The point is, the Nazis believed they were being patriotic and acting in defense of their kin and for what they thought was the betterment of the human race. They simply chose to apply those principles in ways which were selfish, motivated by error, and executed with great evil. But again, only if evil is a real thing. There are no cartoon supervillains. People like Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz, who love evil and do evil because it is evil. Every bad person is trying to serve something they feel is good, whether that is service to their family or nation, or the protection of the human race, or the betterment of the future, or even just their own financial stability or experience of pleasure. This is how justifications work. We tell ourselves that our sin is excusable because it's not hurting anyone, or it's not as bad as other evils, or we deserve this thing we've stolen, or it makes us happy. We appeal to something which is good in principle, to justify something we know is bad in application. So in short, just as we know the past is real because of our shared experience of memory, we know objective morals are real because of not only our own personal experience, but the universal human experience of the same moral principles. We even appeal to these principles when we do evil. I hope this clarifies my position a bit. Chaosism had more insightful questions, and we will visit them next time your Rent-A-Friend sits here behind the purple RAF radio mic. This is your Rent-A-Friend saying thanks for listening to Rent-A-Friend Radio. Don't wait for fate, there's no debate. I'm your friend at a very reasonable hourly rate. You dudes and dearies, send me your queries and I'll holler back Jack with answers and facts. I'll see you again. I hate this to end, but thanks for letting me be your Rent-A-Friend. Chaosism had more insightful questions, and we will visit them next time. Next time your Rent-A-Friend sits behind the purple RAF microphone radio. Dang it. Next time your Rent-A-Friend sits here behind the... Oh, dang it, why is this so hard? Friend sits here behind the purple RAF microphone radio. Dang it! Behind the purple RAF radio mic. Next time your Rent-A-Friend sits here behind the purple RAF radio mic. Boom! Got it that time. First try. Oh, dear.